I'm going to get yelled at for this one, and I don't care. Today's entry on the enemies list is the Democratic Party's consulting class. Let me be very blunt with you folks, because somebody has to. The Democratic Party's latest brainstorm session out in a meeting in California with major donors, billionaires, included such brainstorms as they need to learn how to talk to men and to rebrand it the party. This is not a strategy. This is donor bait cosplay bullshit. And this is why the Democratic consulting class, who thinks they can power their way through the next election cycle and the next presidential election cycle by just throwing a little more money at the same things they've been doing, will fail. And that is why they're on the enemies list. Now, let me have a caveat here before I start. I'm a former Republican. I am not a progressive. I'm not a particularly liberal guy. I believe in the Constitution. I believe in the rule of law. I love this country passionately. I have and will sacrifice things for this country over the years. My comfort, my money, my stability, my security. A lot of Democrats will start listening to this and go, fuck that guy. He has no right to tell us what to do. The Lincoln Project guys have no right to tell us what to do. You know what? Maybe you're right. But is what you're doing working? Are you on the enemies list because what you're doing is working or because it's not working? Look, you can put a new logo on the Titanic all you want, but the iceberg has already ripped the hull open. I want to start with one area where you guys are particularly fucking up. And I want to be blunt about this. And again, I know I'm going to get yelled at for this one. I know people are going to be mad at me for this one, but you're going to spend $20 million to talk to men? Listen, I'm going to give you this advice for free. The men that you have lost in this coalition that you once had very solidly, white, working class, disaffected, they've been joined by a new group, these younger men who are underemployed, they're chronically online, and they're stampeding into the arms of Trump and this authoritarian movement, not in spite of the Democrats, but because of them. Now, look, I know some of you think, oh, well, the answer is this endless conveyor belt of mealy focus grouped ads, and they're somehow going to convince these young men to come home to the Democratic Party. They're somehow going to convince these middle class and working class men to come home to the Democratic Party. Oh, we're going to show a TikTok where John Tester shows how to change a spark plug or whatever the fuck you're doing. Guys, the inorganic nature of the thought that you're going to start with a PowerPoint in a five-star hotel, and that is somehow going to give you a vector into winning these guys back, is insane. The things that a lot of Democrats are doing right now, there are a number who are doing very meritorious things. They're out there in the social media space. They're punching back. They're in the game. Okay. And there are a lot of them that are right now. God bless them. But the committees, from the DNC to the campaign committee, to the Senate committee, to a lot of the major Democratic super PACs, are still wandering in the darkness. It's like when you see Chuck Schumer say, we're going to send a sternly worded letter, like he's trying to throw down with somebody.
We sent him a very strong letter just the other day, asking 8 very strong questions about why this isn't just a pretext.
Well, you'll let us know if you get a response to that letter.
Right. If you're Chuck Schumer, you're in Hakeem Jeffries sitting on the steps, Chuck Schumer writing strongly worded letters, you are under enormous pressure from the base to do more.
Real quick. But we're talking about Chuck Schumer. I think he's really benefiting right now from not having anyone really standing up to him in his own caucus and challenging him, because he's on that line. John Boehner used to say a leader without followers is a guy taking a walk.
Guy taking a walk.
Yeah, we're getting in that territory, particularly with the base. They're really angry at Chuck Schumer.
And you have a lot of these people that are producing these ideas and these strategies that are basically like, they remind me like Ezra Klein, like, what is this Carhartt thing these fellows wear in the countryside? It just doesn't feel organic or natural. And look, you can spend your weekends in a Ritz-Carlton in Monterey or wherever the hell that meeting was with a bunch of billionaires promising these slide deck miracles are going to, we need to just finesse our messaging a little bit more. We need to just find a little different way to address them, find some different social media platforms. I will bet you that weekend, in terms of proposals, there was probably $500 million worth of spending proposed over that. And some of it probably got funded. But Democrats still haven't accepted something very clear in the era of Trump. You don't win people back just by trying to finesse the brand or trying to repackage your policy in a different way. You win by showing people you give a shit. You win by showing people you have a spine. These disaffected male voters are not going to be like, well, that PDF was certainly persuasive, or my God, I listened to Matt Iglesias on this podcast about civics, and I'm changing my. You don't reach people that way. These conversations we have on this podcast, even they're not necessarily the right strategy for reaching these men, but at least we try to be direct and blunt. And there's a certain degree to which, and maybe it's an internal cultural thing, but as an ex-Republican guy who was a pipe swinging guy, I would have loved to have gone up against these guys back in the day, because they build these elaborate confections, these elaborate constructs, and I don't know if they work. And I see the evidence that they don't work. Anybody can build Rome, but once the Visigoths arrive and start tearing shit down, did the defenses of Rome work at that point? No. You reach people by standing for something, standing against something. And I see this a lot, and Democrats keep mistaking policy for narrative and storytelling and myth making and mission. And I will say this 1 billion times. I've been in a lot of these meetings where Democrats say, we don't know how to do messaging properly. We don't know how to communicate the right way. Try communicating at all. Try not leading with policy. Democrats, it's like they think that slapping a coat of paint on this rickety falling down house is going to be the same thing as saying, hey, here's a new house. If you want to rebrand, you can't rebrand without reforming how you do everything. And that's from the operational campaign side to what things you want to do in the country, what things you want to address, accomplish, be. Getting back to men. And by the way, Scott Galloway has talked about this in ways that are vastly more articulate than I can, about the crisis of young men. But I'm going to talk to you about where you're screwing it up with these guys, because I think that is really the core. It's really the gut of the crisis that's affecting the Democratic Party right now. You decided a long time ago, you had a coalition, and there was one group in the coalition you didn't really want in the coalition. That was men. And that's why these working class voters who once believed in things like unions and once believed in things that the Democratic Party fought for are gone. So if you want to talk to men without addressing the hard and ugly parts of the truth about this, the Democratic coalition left those men behind. A lot of them, especially younger men now. And in many cases, they did it assertively. Because let's be real, there's a part of the Democratic coalition that does not like working class white men. They think the worst of them, and those working class white men hear that message loud and clear, culturally, economically, and emotionally. If you think you can fight this like post-authoritarian death cult that is MAGA with like LinkedIn approved rebranding and soft jazz kitchen table issues and jazz hands about what you're going to do, you're out of your damn minds. Every day MAGA feeds their base, including the new members of their base, a complete diet of rage and grievance and identity politics and myth making. You don't get to counter that with, bullet points about tax credits for childcare. You don't get to counter that by saying, well, what about climate? If you don't believe, shut the fuck up. Working class voters do not give a fuck about any of your issues that you think are the center of the universe. They really don't. When they hear climate or guns or any number of these culture war issues that you believe are the centerpiece of what you should be talking about, just percolate into your brain that you're writing off a really big chunk of the electorate right there. Those things aren't relevant to their lives. Those things do not decide if they get to pay their mortgage or feed their kids. Now, you can make the argument, oh, well, you've got to think about this because climate. Okay, that's fine. I'm not saying that those issues don't have merit for discussion, but they're not what you think they are in the minds of most voters who are out there. Part of the problem is, you're talking about talking to men. Stop talking at them. You talk at them a lot. You are bad at this. You are bad at that. You've caused this problem. Back to the beginning of time. Stop it. Talk about them. Why not talk about them? Why not actually have discussions and say, hey, you know what? We may have fucked up for a long time, but we're trying to fix it. We're trying to be better at this. We're trying to give you guys, the same courtesy and the same moment and the same intention and the same attention that we give everybody else. You should start talking about how Trump has fucked them. And I'm not saying You talk about Trump as, cause you cannot. No, Trump has fucked them. He is robbing them. He is stealing their future. He is stealing their kids' future. He is making it so those young men who Democrats still they look around like, how did we lose young men? You know how you lost young men? Because you didn't promise them a future. He did. Even if it was negative and dark and fucked up and weird and bad. Plan beats no plan every time. You should be telling them that Trump is ripping them off. He's, this idea that young people are depressed because they can't afford a home or get married or have kids or have a future or have financial security. It's true and it's real. Why are you saying those things to them? Why aren't you talking to them in plain English, in words of fewer syllables and more gut and more emotion? Why aren't you telling them that a bunch of billionaire fascist dipshits are manipulating them and weaponizing all their pain? Okay. Offer them an alternative. You want to rebrand the party? Start with courage. Start by being unafraid to clean out your house. Push out the calcified bullshit that has defined the way the party operates for a long time. Because I got to tell you, there are, by the way, all these people in Monterey or wherever this hotel was, or this big conference they had, I'm sure they're brilliant people. I'm sure they're Ivy League educated people. I'm sure they're smarter than me in 100 different areas. Okay. But most of them would not know an effective campaign issue if it bit them on the ass in the NPR green room. Okay. There's a donor class dependency that they have that has convinced them that you have to focus group everything. You have to test everything. You have to make everything inoffensive. When the Republicans were spending $300 million on the trans ads last year, you know why they did it? Because it worked. Then the Democrats were given ads that pushed back on the trans ads. You know what they did? They said, oh, these have a blowback score. These might offend our own coalition. That's unilateral fucking disarmament, and it's absolute political malpractice at the highest level. But look, take this as a lesson from a recovering Republican. Men, especially the men that you have lost, they do not respect weakness. They're not flocking to Trump just because they love tax cuts and private equity guys. They flock to MAGA and to Trump and the GOP because it fights. Even if it's this idiotic, performative, cruel fighting, it appeals to them because it is an exercise of power. Democrats a lot of the time come across a bunch of guidance counselors saying to the arsonists trying to burn down the school, hey, please don't light the second match. Please be nice. If you want to fix the problems you have with men in a lot of ways, it is not about a listening tour. It's not about focus groups. It's not about weakness. It's about strength. It's about patriotism. And I know I get this lesson once in a while from Democrats who quietly say well, of course, since the slavery problem. No, fuck off. Okay. 700,000 Americans gave their lives to end slavery. We have done the right thing in this country slowly and painfully over the years. But the idea that you're going to start out with land acknowledgments when you're trying to win back moderate suburban and working class men, or you're going to say, we can't love the Constitution because it was flawed in its inception, or or the Republic has always been wrong and bad and stupid and we've always done the wrong thing. The purpose of America is to improve and to become the better nation. The purpose of America is to be a broad, pluralistic society. And there have been things in the past that have been wrong and bad and terrible in this country. And we have slowly bent that arc, trying to hang every bit of that guilt on every single working class voter that's out there. And by the way, the Republicans aren't just building a white working class coalition now. They're building a coalition of white working class and African-American working class and Hispanic working class folks. And if you think that their demographics alone will save you, you are wrong. Look, this is a tough one to do, and I know a lot of people are going to yell at me for this. But if we don't recapture for a pro-democracy movement the votes and hearts and minds of young men, this country is going to plunge into some very bad places. Remember, by the time Hitler rolled around, yes, in the beginning, he was activating that post-World War I generation, but those guys were in their 40s by the time he really took power. There's a generation of young men in this country who were told from the beginning, the minute they went into grade school, oh, girls are better, girls are smarter, girls have more discipline, girls deserve more time from the teacher because they're good in class. The essential nature of being a boy and a young man is sometimes that you're a little more rambunctious. Sometimes you're a little more high energy. But they've been told that for a long time now. And a lot of Democrats have been part of that message. This is not an argument about not elevating girls and women. That's absurd. But if you treat people like a villain, if you treat people like the bad guy, if you treat people like they are the problem, then you're giving people like Trump and movements like MAGA an off-ramp for them where they go, fuck it, those people hate me. I don't have to agree with everything they believe in, but they're not going to tell me to shut up. They're not going to say, you're out of control. Go take your Ritalin, boy. This is a problem. And Democrats will pretend it's not a problem until the entire thing is in ruins if they're not careful. You want to talk to men? Speak to them in English. Don't talk in policy. Listen to their story. Listen to what the problems they have. There's an idea that the coalition was big enough without men. Well, your math isn't working. And the idea that somehow you're going to bring the consultocracy together on the Democratic side that's had its ass whipped over and over and over and over and over again by stupid people with good tools and a command of the language and the storytelling and the narrative that you abandon for policy questions, then you're going to lose. And until you can figure that out, you're going to stay on the enemies list. Thanks, folks. Talk to you soon.